So if you start up your bike and it runs like this, or maybe even like this, or even like this, then maybe it needs to be tuned. So you have to have a starting point, jetting close enough to get the bike started. So this 26mm PWK carb came with a 38 pilot and a 115 main. So that's close enough. So to start out with, I adjust the mixture screw. But before I do that, I get the bike to operating temperature. If your mixture screw is on the air filter side of the carb, like on this PWK, then it adjusts air. And if your mixture screw is on the engine side of the carb, like on this VM22, then it adjusts fuel. And you can see the screw here on the engine side of the carb on the VM22. So air screw, fuel screw. So on the PWK, if you turn the air screw out, it leans out the mixture. If you turn the air screw in, it richens the mixture. So now that the bike's warmed up to operating temperature, I will adjust the air screw. So I'll fire the bike up, and I usually turn down the idle to where it's idling pretty slow. And then I will turn out the air screw until the idle speeds up to its fastest point, and that's where it's running most efficient. And then once I get the idle screw turned out to where the engine's running its fastest, I might turn it out like another 1/8 of a turn or so. And then if it doesn't do anything, I'll turn it back to that point to where it's idling the fastest, it's most efficient. And then at that point, I will reset the slide screw. So let me fire it up and try it out. So now I turn the idle down as low as I can get it. So it's idling nice and slow. So I adjusted the air screw out until the bike was idling its fastest, and then I turned it out another 1/8 of a turn, but it really didn't do anything. So I turned it back to that point where it was idling the fastest, it's most efficient. And then I readjusted the slide screw back down to where I wanted the idle. So now at this point, I check and see how many turns the air screw's out. And if it's more than say 1.5 to 2 turns out, then I know that the pilot jet is too big and it needs a smaller pilot jet. So now I will check and see how many turns this thing's out. So now I'll turn it all the way back in. So there's a half, there's 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, about 3 1/4. So that tells me right there that the pilot jet, a 38 pilot jet for this setup, is too big. So I need to downsize the pilot jet. Because like I said, I usually want the air screw about maybe 1.5 turns out. That's the sweet spot. Maybe 1.5 or 2. So now I'll pull this bowl off of here and swap out this 38 pilot probably for around a 32, because I kind of know what works up here at 3,700 foot elevation. I mean, you don't have to jump that far. I mean, you can go down to like 35 or whatever and test it from there. Pull this bowl off of here. So pull out this 38, and then I'm going to pop back in a 32 and then retest it. So I got the 32 pilot in there. So now I will turn out this air screw to about 1.5. That's about the sweet spot. And I'll go from there and try it again. So we're already idling pretty slow, so I'll adjust it from here. So the air screw is about 1.5 turns out right now, so that's about perfect. That's a sweet spot. So that pilot jet is right there in the ballpark, and then I readjusted the slide screw once that was set. So now the next step that I usually do is take the bike out for a top speed run to make sure the main jet is in the ballpark, and then I'll read the plug. And if we got that jetting right, then I will come back and I will adjust the mid-range or the needle if it needs anything. So let me go out and do that.
A few minutes later.
All right, so I got the top speed dialed in. The plug looks good. The main jet's right there in the ballpark. Runs really good at top speed. So now I will fire it up and we'll test the mid-range throttle response. The needle is set just about right because there's no bog or hesitation. So on that throttle response, if I did give it throttle and then it hangs up really high RPM, and then it slowly comes back down to idle, then that means that it's too lean, that the pilot jet's too lean. And then on the other hand, if I gave it gas and then it almost dies after you let off, and then it slowly comes back up, then the pilot jet is usually too rich. So that's why I usually don't really go any farther until I get this thing tuned to about 1.5 turns out, 1.5 to 2 turns out. And then that way I know I have the pilot right. So that way it doesn't have that lean condition where the idle takes a while to come back down, or where it's too rich. That way I already know I have the pilot in the ballpark before I go ahead and test the top speed and then the mid range. So now I'll go run this bike around and we'll see how it runs. Yeah, it definitely has good mid-range with this car. It's really throttle responsive. Yeah, you don't hear a lot of backfiring too when you come off the throttle, so it's not really lean. So if you do want to see a video where the tip-in throttle response was too lean and I had to adjust the needle, check out the VM22 tuning video.